Okay, go.
All right. Well, welcome out everybody. Today I'm excited for you to join us, learning about some tips to start a podcast. I am by no means a know-it-all in this. It's been a new adventure for myself in launching my podcast, but I've definitely learned that it's a lot easier than you think once you get into it. So I'm just going to kind of go through and kind of talk about brief tips because it's going to be hard within the time frame that we have to really go into depth. But at the end of the presentation, I do have a resource link, and then I am going to make this slideshow available with those links in there. So then you guys can go and research and do a lot of that on your own. So here we go. So let's start with why podcasts are the route to go right now. The biggest reason are people really like podcasts because they're perfect to listen to on the go when they're going to work. They're entertaining. People can access them anywhere. They're actually kind of taking the place of blogs. A lot of blogs, what they're doing now is they are turning their blog into a podcast, so then you still can either read the information that is provided or you can take and listen to it as well. So another reason why is it's a way to position yourself as an authority in your industry. If you feel that you are very knowledgeable in a specific area or place, starting a podcast is a great way to share that information and to give a little bit back to the community, especially if you are starting any education platforms, like wanting to teach any online classes and stuff. This will help kind of establish you and let people get to know you as, okay, does this person know what they're talking about? The other thing is it's really affordable. There's little to no cost to get started. More than likely, it will probably be $100 to get started with your podcast. Most of that money right now would be going for setup with your mics, depending on what hosting site you go to with that, and then anything in additional to the music or effects that you need, or getting your podcast cover created and so forth. So the other thing is it's really fun. I'll be honest, the first one is really nerve-wracking because you're trying to figure out, okay, do I sound okay? Does this make sense? And I'm going to tell you, it's not going to sound right to yourself. It's not going to make sense to yourself. The best you can do is just put it out there, and believe it or not, people are going to enjoy it. I've actually gotten some really good feedback and really good advice too on how to kind of work it a little bit better. So people are pretty excited, especially when they know there are people close to you that get to hear you and get to enjoy seeing you create that. So it's also a way to help build your brand, whether it's a personal brand or a business brand. It's a good way just to get information out there. So let's just get into it, how to start your podcast. So I broke it up into a couple different stages. The first is the planning stage. The biggest question you need to ask yourself is, why do you want to start a podcast and who's your podcast for? If you do not know who your audience is, it's going to make it really hard for you to come up with content to create for your podcast. The next step is, how often are you going to release it? Are you going to do it daily? Do you want to do it weekly, 3 times a week, once a month? What kind of, sorry, I got to move my thing real fast because I can't see all my notes. Okay, there we go. Basically, what can you commit to, and what does your audience want? If you feel like once a week is enough for you and you can fully commit to that, stay with once a week. Don't feel pressured to do more or less, especially when you're beginning. As you go on, you might be able to find that, okay, I'm going to add an additional one this week, or a bonus episode this week. For me, once a week right now is plenty, and I will hopefully be able to add on bonuses and additional things like that. So So once you finally decide how often you want to release it, you're going to want to know how long your podcast will be. So ideally, a weekly podcast, I put 30 to 45 minutes. Even 25 minutes is about average on a weekly episode. If you do it a few days a week, anywhere from 15 to 20, 25 minutes is enough. And then if you're doing it like once a month or say you're doing it twice a month, hour might be, if you can come up with enough content and stuff, an hour might work that way. But again, it's knowing who your audience is and what your information that you're giving, because some people might not want to listen for a full hour, and you might need to test that out a little bit to see which, if you do like a 30-minute podcast versus an hour podcast, and gauge the engagement with that podcast to decide where your audience is, kind of that sweet spot. Like, for instance, if you're going to say your audience are stay-at-home moms, they don't have time to listen to a full hour of your content. So 15 to 20 minutes, even 30 minutes, think about like in between nap times, or when they're doing dishes or running errands, picking up kids. Think of those sort of things. If it's geared for more of the business type, think about they'll probably be listening into the morning where they're checking emails, or possibly during lunch hour and stuff. So just keep those kind of things in mind. Next is, what style will you choose? So there's a couple different styles. There's solo, co-hosted, interviews, roundtable. So solo is basically yourself talking the entire time, coming up with the content, just kind of giving what your advice is, or educating, voicing your opinion. A lot of people do really great with that. Co-hosted, I've heard some co-hosted ones that are really great. You just have somebody with you, someone to banter off of. It actually makes it a little bit easier starting out to have somebody to talk to while you're staring at a mic, because you don't have an audience in the room with you. So that part to me is the intimidating part. You're talking to yourself. So if you have a co-host, at least you have each other to kind of bounce off of. Interviews are really good. And we'll talk about how to access and do remote podcasts, so that you know kind of how that is. Roundtable, you get several people in talking about a topic. And the great thing is you don't have to just stick to one style. You can combine the styles in different ways. So for me, I'm more on the solo side, but I'm going to have interviews as well. So my goal is to have at least 2 interviews a month in my podcasts. And so yeah, you can kind of gauge and see what it is you want to do with that, and it's fun. The good thing is there's no right or wrong way to do it. It really is going to be an experiment, and that's the fun part about starting out, is you can really try some different stuff, see what hits home with more of your audience, and then you can kind of start going, okay, yeah, I'm going to just start gearing more towards that direction. So your next stage, or the next step in the plan. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Some people are really good just rambling off, and they're able to just talk and do their thing. And some really like to have something that's scripted, that they can just read word from word. Others just like to have an outline just so that they can stay on point. I kind of do both. I have an outline, and then there's certain phrases or certain things that I do have scripted. And there's some pros and cons. When you're fully scripted, it's really hard to make it sound natural, that you're not just reading. And so my advice would be, if you are going to do fully scripted, is to really practice that script, reading it out loud over and over until you can get more of your natural tone. So it's not just like, I was 5 years old when this happened, kind of thing, that, you can actually feel okay improvising and adding a little bit more into that. So yeah, there's a million different places, and I have some of those sources at the end too, that you can look at different ideas on outlining. You can find them all over the internet, but basically it just comes down to what you like. Me, I have a Word document that just lists episode. Do I have a guest in this episode? I write out my intro and my outro, and then I kind of have my points in between, or my questions if I'm interviewing in between, to touch base with that. So let's see. We are recording, Angie. So I'm glad to see you. Hi. So the next fun part is to decide on your podcast name. So it really should be unique but easy to remember. So you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 words tops. When I came up with mine, so mine's Shutter Up, and I wanted something that kind of, because my podcast is kind of geared towards photography and some of the ins and outs and business of photography, or just business in general, but also I wanted to be able to, if there's just a topic I want to go off on, I can go off on it. So I kind of did a play on words with Shutter Up. And so have fun with that too, because if it's more, there's one I've always thought was hilarious, and it is funny to listen to, but I will admit it is a very saucy podcast, and once you hear the title, you'll understand why. But one of the first ones I came across was called "So My Father Wrote a Porno," and it's really funny. But if you don't like sauciness, I would suggest not reading it. But the setup is this poor son is reading his dad's erotica writings with his friends, and they're laughing about it and how bad it's written and all of that. So I mean, there's really anything out there that you can discuss, but if you like kind of some sauciness, I totally recommend that podcast. But so the next one too is create a podcast cover. So, oh, come on. Are we gonna click? There we go. So here we go. So that's my podcast cover. Ideally, your cover art should be it should be a square. So think of an album cover kind of feel. You can do it 14 by 14 pixels. You want it in JPEG or PNG, meaning those are JPEG is more compressed than PNG, is a little bit larger, and that you want it under 500 kilobytes. Now, if that is foreign language to you all, there's a couple places you can go. You can go to Canva, and you can design one there. They do have templates there. You can go to Fiverr and hire a professional, or you can talk to, Arcade Creative Studio. Self-plug, I know, shameless. But I mean, I did do an awesome cover, I think. So, but yeah, there's different ways to do that. But you want to make sure that when you have your cover, that it reflects what your podcast is going to be, and reflects part of who you are, put your personality out there. Because even though that you're speaking and you're not visibly seen, people are still wanting to know who you are and what your personality is. And so you want to take advantage of showing that in your cover art. So that's that so far. Do we have any questions so far? I will have a Q&A at the end if there are any questions, but I just want to make sure I'm not ignoring anybody. Double check chat. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, here we go. Equipment needed. Okay, so at the bare minimum, you need a computer with a USB port for a mic. I have seen a lot of people use their phones, like iPhones. Androids can work as well to produce the podcast. So, but just realize the better quality of the equipment, the better quality your system sound is going to be. So phones are great. There are some limitations that you have on phones versus using your computer to record. But you also, there's ways that you can actually still utilize your phone to record and have it be a higher quality. And I'm going to share those here next. There we go. Okay, so This is the technical stage. This is the stage that freaks everybody out, and there are some solutions, so bear with me here. So first of all, you have to figure out what your recording and editing software is going to be. If you're going based on the computer, Audacity is a free recording and editing software. It's open source, so there's never a cost, and it is available for Mac and PC, or Windows. So there's millions of tutorials out there to help you get started with it. It's pretty user-friendly, very simple for if you're just recording and doing simple editing, but you can do some really cool, crazy stuff with it. Adobe Audition does cost money. It is either included in Creative Cloud, which is about $53 a month, or if you just get Adobe alone, it's about $20 a month. So just depending on what you're comfortable with. If you're already using Adobe products and you're comfortable with their interfaces and stuff, I would suggest Adobe Audition. I use Adobe Audition just because I also use the Creative Suite for other things as well. So, and then there is GarageBand on Mac. That comes, I think, installed already, but what I was reading up on it, getting ready for this, is that some of the features are starting to get limited and people aren't seeing as great as results when they're doing their editing or recording for their podcast. So, but if you're familiar with it and you're comfortable with it and you feel like it produces the quality that you're comfortable with, use it. So for cell phones, I didn't have a chance to really look at recorders for that, but there are tons of apps out there that allow you to record. Also, I know like Google, you can do recordings through their apps and stuff, and so I would just find a recording that's simple to use and that will convert into the files you need to upload it into Audacity or whatever your editing program is. So when you have remote guests, so when you have people you want to interview but they can't come into your studio or you can't meet up with them, Skype or Zoom are probably your top two. Great thing with Skype and Zoom, you can record. So there's tips out there how settings to set your stuff to that you get the highest quality recording. I actually did that when I did an interview with Angie, is we did it via Zoom and I recorded that. So one tip is to definitely wear a headset when you're doing Skype or Zoom so that you don't get a lot of reverb. I did find that problem when I was interviewing Angie's. I didn't wear a headset, and so I was in a closed-in room, and so the reverb, the echo is what reverb is, was really bad. And next time I know I'm gonna need to wear headphones or a headset to kind of cut down on that part of it. You can also record phone calls. There's a lot of options out there for doing that as well. So I know through Google Voice you can do that. If you have a Google Voice number, you can do recordings that way as well. Music and sound effects, there's a lot of free options out there, but you've got to be careful. You need to check copyright. Even if it's free, there are some limitations. Like, is it free for personal use or is it free for commercial use? Technically, your podcast is commercial because you are broadcasting your brand yourself. Eventually, you might have sponsorships and find other ways to make money from it. So you need to always presume that your podcast is commercial for that. So make sure you pay attention to those copyright issues so you don't get in trouble, because what happens is if somebody comes across it and says, oh, this is a copyright infringement, they'll take your podcast down. And so that doesn't look very good for you professionally, and it will affect the different places that your podcast is broadcasted from. There are paid options for music. Motion Array is really good. Storyblocks, all of those places have, usually it's royalty-free music. If you see royalty-free, it doesn't mean that it's free. It just means that you do not have to pay royalties on that music. for instance, if you got a song from, I don't know, Beyonce or something, usually what happens is you pay an initial price and then you have to pay a royalty for each time it's used, up to so much. And so that's what you want to look out for too. Royalty free is really great, and copyright. Those are the two things you want to make sure you're looking at for those. Okay. So everyone take a breath. Are we good to go? I know it's a lot of information in such a short amount of time, so I try to keep it as simple as possible. And like I said, you guys will get access to this presentation. I'll make sure that Heather gets the link to send it out with the broadcasts, and then also I will put the link in the chat for those who are live today. So hosting your podcast, that's a big deal. That means where are you going to upload it to so that it can be broadcasted out. So there's several options, but you want to do your homework and you want to find one that's going to fit you. So everybody has an opinion about what's best, what's the worst, what's the greatest. I tried to limit that down for you guys. Personally, I use Anchor FM. Another friend of mine who has a podcast started with Anchor FM, and it was very easy. The other thing I like about Anchor FM is you can actually record in Anchor FM your podcast, so you wouldn't even need to download Audacity. You can record there, and they have some light editing that you can include with that. So that's why I liked it. I think it is very user-friendly for that first-time podcaster. Other hosts include Buzzsprout, Captivate, Podbean, Castos. Those all have monthly subscriptions. And so if that's something that you can allow in your budget, by all means, go that route. They do have a little bit more to offer, as in how they host your podcast and the data that you get back. You don't get to know as much information through Anchor FM. They give you just an overall general, whereas these other ones you can go into more detail to really focus in on who's listening and who is your audience. So if that's really important to you to start with, then using these other hosts would probably be a good bet. For me, Anchor was a good way for me to start with hardly a budget. And eventually, once I get mine built up, I might go ahead and switch to a different host later on. So also, I do have a host link right here for you to click on so that you can see the list of all of them, and you can do your homework, go through, find, again, what one's going to work best for you. Okay. Here's Q&A. So I went through that a lot faster than I thought. So does anyone have any questions or want to know a little bit more details about anything? All right, let's see. Best equipment to start. So I put in right here in the resources, I put a couple examples. I'll show you, see if it'll pull it up. So right here, this is the setup I have right now for my podcast. The reason being is this was really awesome, having the arm to hold the mic up so you can adjust it. It makes it easier for me to see my screen when I'm recording. It comes with the noise guards to help limit the crackling and the background noise, the wind noise and stuff. There is also one that I found for, let me go back. There is one I found for, oh, well, let me do that while I'm here. Sorry, guys. I'll copy that and put that in there. What I want to do is hit present. There we go. So, oh, let me go back to screen sharing. Sorry, guys. There we go. There we go. So I did find one for phones as well. This one's set up a little bit different, but from what I could read, it works really well for traveling. You just have your phone on the hook. I get a lot of phones nowadays don't have the phone jack, not the phone jack, the headphone jack. I'm lacking the word of what it's actually called, but you can buy, I can't even think of the word right now, but you can buy the connectors that would allow you to put it into the USB. There's also wireless mics and stuff, Bluetooth mics and stuff. So I would just look and see what ones will give the best sound quality. I guarantee if you're just recording straight into your phone or from like just a headset that comes with your phone, you'll capture enough, but it just won't have that nice crisp sound that you get when you're listening to a podcast. So let's see. There we go. Is there any other questions? And did that one answer your question, Dawn?
Do you know what? I'll just unmute here. Sorry.
There you go. You're totally fine. I know my chat fully disappeared. I don't even know where it went.
Yeah, I know it keeps maximizing on me, and I'm like, no, come back. So that's the number one thing that people ask me is that. And so yes, that did answer the question. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Excited to see that and to have people have that information. And then the second thing that people ask a lot is, and they asked me, they're like, is she going to talk about this? Is she going to talk about this? It was music. If you have any ideas as far as resources for free music.
Yeah, and I can add these to the list too. One, that Motion Array that I mentioned, they do have free music that you can use. Some of those places, what happens is if you go to Motion Array or Storyblock and stuff, you can look for free music that will be free to use for your podcast too, because a lot of people like to put testers out there, and then if you like it, then you'll keep using it. Like the one I use for mine, I got it free off of Motion Array, and it was free for commercial use. So I like Motion Array. Storyblock, I'm getting used to them again. But they have a lot of similar stuff as well. And you'll notice too, depending on where you go, you'll see the same music or the same artists in the different things. And then there's CC Mixter. They have a lot of free music. Most of it's free. If you go to them, you have CC Mixter, and then you go to their archive basically, and you can go through all of that. And you just again look, is it good for personal use? Is it good for commercial use? And if it's free and it says commercial use, you're good to go. So those are the main areas I go to if you want free. Of course, there's always paid options out there that you can do, and usually it's not too much. And pay attention if you do pay for it. Pay attention to how many times it can be used, because there are some limitations. It'll say you can use it up to an audience of 10,000. So when you hit 10,000, if you're ethical, you either have to repay for that licensing or you have to switch your music. So just pay a lot of attention to that, because YouTube, like say if you ever record your podcast live and you put the video portion of it onto YouTube and stuff, they're really cracking down on music. And a lot of people like to go around and say, oh, there's a copyright. That happened to my husband. He had the paperwork, everything from Storyblock saying, no, he can use this on YouTube. And so he disputed it and won the dispute, but just be prepared that that's out there. I know he has found stuff on YouTube as well. It's been a few years since I went looking on YouTube, but again, I'm really iffy because sometimes people like to copy and pretend it's their music and you find out it's not. So
yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Those were the questions that I had. I don't know if anyone else has questions.
No, and you're fine. And so let me tell you a little bit the resources. So what I have here is basically these are the two websites that I found when starting that I kind of used to gauge how to start my podcast. This one's version, it's a 20 step-by-step process that they completely write out. So if you really like the details and stuff, this one's really good. Shopify has just kind of a more like, hey, do this, 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 and this. It's not as detailed, but a lot of tips from there as well. So, and then I included, if you want to start one and you don't know what to talk about, I also made a link to 50 podcast ideas that you can look into and do. And then Buzzsprout also had a good article on how to script your podcast. So I kind of just included a lot of the information I used getting started with mine. So, and I'm still learning. That's the fun part. It's you get going and you start learning, and there's ins and outs and all of that. But I think that's part of the adventure of doing podcasts. I think a lot of podcasters I've listened to have had that struggle. A lot of the first podcasts sound the same, like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but, you know, so don't be be nervous, but know that you're not alone in trying to get this started and all, so.
And I think the main thing that's the main thing I hear from most people is that when they start and once they get in a rhythm and they know, they get in their own rhythm and to where they're comfortable doing a podcast, and then 2 years later they look back and they're like, oh my goodness, that was horrible. But that's okay, because everyone has to start somewhere, and
exactly.
you have to learn and grow through the process. In the process, that's the only way to do better.
That's exactly what I keep telling myself. I can't wait till 6 months from now to listen back and be like, whoa, okay, I've improved quite a bit. Like, okay, we're good to go.
That's awesome. Yeah. That'll be fun to see. I can't wait to see that. So good job. Yours are good. They're awesome.
Thanks.
Good job, Randy.
Thank you. So, well, if there's nothing, if no one else has any questions, thank you guys for tuning in. And I hope that for those who watch this later, that's some valuable information, and feel free to reach out to me if something doesn't make sense. You can just reach me at RK Creative Consulting. That's at gmail.com. That my other emails, I'm getting revamped right now, so that one will come straight to me, and I'm more than happy to, you know, give you more advice or point you in some different directions. So.
Yay. Thank you. Will you add that to your resources page before you send it out?
I will.
Sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome. So,
thanks, Randy.
Okay.